so what do we say? What has been our response so far? Well, among even from very conservative Mennonites to the whole the whole gamut has been an acceptance of computers at some level. So that's often a little surprising to people.
Yeah.
Everything from Grafdale Conference, which is horse and buggy, to Biblical Mennonite Alliance, they use computers at some level or another. So what has been the response? Well, use of them. Another thing is not, and we kind of said this in point one, but no kind of simple rejection. No group simply rejects technology, not even information and communication technology.
Well, I think the perception of a lot of people, like that might not be, or even some Mennonites or people that aren't necessarily Mennonite, just kind of assume, at least, especially for the more conservative group, that they've just rejected out of hand that this is all evil and it's all bad. And that's really interesting to hear that. No, they've really thought through, what parts they do want to keep, and maybe we don't always necessarily agree with everyone where they all decide.
The other thing is that a Christian has a responsibility to, you could use the word judge, that's a kind of a theological way of saying it, or discern in relation to technology. You don't just accept it, you think about it and make the buzzword is an intentional decision instead of just accepting what comes to you.
Yeah.
So how are Mennonites coping with it? Well, they're really thinking about it. Really giving it some deep thought.
Because, that's the problem with technology. It can be very passively observed. You pull out your smartphone, you scroll through Facebook feed, it's very passive, you just kind of, just absorb it as it comes, kind of thing. That's pretty good to hear that not everybody does that.
That they, give it some thought. Most people are okay with saying, I can decide on something as an individual. If I don't have a computer or the internet, I'm just weird, right? The difference with Anabaptists is they do it as a group. They think about things together. So think about it. Will you make a better decision if it's a bunch of people thinking together, all ages, all kinds of businesses, all kinds of wealth levels, and they all come together and think about what's a right way to do this? Which is going to be a better way to do it? Well, the typical American way is, if one of your buddies doesn't have a computer, they decide not to, he might be unique, but so be it. They may do that. Yeah. But the thing that's really not allowed in American culture is for a whole group of people to say, you know what, we're going to think about this, be really intentional together. But that's exactly what Anabaptists do.
Oh man, and that takes a lot more work. Wow. Yeah.
A lot of, but it really makes you be vigorous.
Yeah.
You have a businessman on the one side that really can use them. You have maybe someone that's more rural on the other side, and they really have to go at it and really think about it vigorously. So.
And I think that's what we really want to see from a discussion like this is people can see, watch this, get some good ideas, and go out there and really process through how are we going to do this.
And another thing I noticed from Grafdale to Biblical Mennonite Alliance that might be a surprise, but consistent almost every one of them, a Mennonite resistance to being entertained. Over and over.
That is interesting.
Just we and especially with our technology, we don't want our technology to be something that is, that we see it as our right to be entertained.
I've never thought about it exactly like that, but just with my experiences, like at SWI, I've been able to interact with a lot of variety of Anabaptists, and I've really noticed that now that you say it in that way, I've never thought about it quite like that.
But there's something
that is interesting.
There's something even more specific about it. Entertained in a visual way. Because intriguingly, Mennonites, when it comes to audio, they're okay with that. So for whatever that means, but in a wide, listening to audio, listening to music, good music, okay. But when it comes to being entertained, and especially visually, there is a big concern about that, and a lot of ways of limiting technology so you don't use it that way. Another thing is that I've noticed repeatedly that the Mennonites talk about technology in relation to their homes or the places that are their domain. And they want to transform that space so that it looks like what they think God's world should look like. So what you often hear in a statement is, we don't want to allow the bad effects of, whatever kind of media might come into our homes, and especially our homes, because homes are our domain. And we can think a way to think about that is wanting to transform not just some hypothetical place, but a very concrete place on earth is transformed, and it extends to the screen you look into. So if there's a phone or an iPad or a PC in your house, just because it's a screen doesn't mean now that little space in our house can look like something else. It also has to conform to what Mennonites and Anabaptists feel is consistent with what God wants.
Yeah.
So and it serves as a way of transforming the world. We don't often think about that, but that's what it's doing. A little part of the world has been transformed because someone wanted to look like what they think God looks like.
That's some profound things. That's some very deliberate decision making that's happening there. That's a very precise distinction that they're making about the home. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I really like that.
The question always is, how far does our domain extend?
Yeah.
And so you will see in statements, some churches say even at work, they will not use a computer that displays things that it has to be filtered there. But that's kind of an extension of creational transformation even to the workplace, if you want to think about it that way.
Yeah.
It is interesting to me. And a story you often hear from Mennonites is someone came to their house or their place of business and they knew they were a swearing kind of person, but when they came there, they didn't swear anymore. Which not only did they transform their place, temporarily they transformed another person, which is a really interesting. It's
kind of contagious.
Yeah, exactly. So it's interesting.
Yeah, and I think in a way this whole world needs a little more of that, like places that are quiet and not bombarded by media and the internet at all times. It used to be that this was just like the greatest thing ever, and I think people are starting to get a little tired of the internet in a way, and the fact that Anabaptists have held on to some of those things of keeping home, as a safe place. I think people are starting to realize how valuable that actually is.
There's one place in the world that pop culture did not yet invade. Another thing you notice, and this one is something we share with evangelicals, and that absolutely do something about avoiding blatantly evil content from reaching us.
Sure.
What do we do? And we can't just think about it, we got to do something. So that is clearly a strong point, avoiding that just awful content, pornography, and it's an epidemic. And Mennonites are, if anyone's concerned about it, they're really concerned about it. From not having the internet to using it in some limited way. So that is another very strong. You see that coming out repeatedly.
Well, and even so in college, that was a big discussion. I'm from the Bible Belt. Like everybody in the class goes to church, and they say they're Christians and whatever. But yet their perception of the internet and the things that are okay to view on the internet, and it was like some of the real Christians in the class were just blown away, like that some people are okay with some of this stuff. And then when someone like myself that's a little more conservative would say, well wait a second, what if we didn't allow these things into our homes, violence and all of this bad, evil content? How would that transform our culture? And all of a sudden people start thinking that, whoa, we don't actually have to allow that kind of thing into our lives. It was a really interesting moment to see that, because people just kind of assume that I'm free, I can watch whatever I want,
Well, opening up that new possibility that no, we don't have to subject ourselves to being a part of that. It's like a new idea.
Yeah, it's possible to have an internet connection and not watch, really violent films or really blasphemous movies. It's possible to do that, and it was just like a whole new revelation for the class, especially the professor. It was fascinating to watch.
One final thing, you know, a lot of people feel that Anabaptists have decided something 50 years ago and they've never changed, and that is entirely a wrong view.
Right. Yeah.
You know, as I was collecting these views on technology from different churches, a very common thing was we're in the process of updating it. In other words, we're adapting and figuring out what it means now 5 years later. And even very conservative churches like Eastern Pennsylvania Mennonite Church, you know, some people, you kind of get the idea they form an opinion and then it stays. But I've watched their statements as the years go by, and there's adaptation. You know, it's adapting. They are adapting. You know, from you know, maybe saying absolutely no internet to having maybe some kind of a filtered. And there's obviously very vigorous discussions going on among them. But the point that is similar between almost all groups, whether they're getting more restrictive or maybe allowing a little more, that they're adapting and trying to find a way to rightly have and balance this thing. So I think you know, thoughtful, ongoing adapting, I think, is another piece to it that is.
Yeah. Well, the challenges, there's always new challenges too.
Yeah.
You know, when it comes to I mean, tomorrow there might be a technology that's invented we never saw coming that the church is going to have to deal with.
But, you know, doing it in the context of a whole group. So you have, you know, you have all those different voices, young people, middle-aged people, older people, people that, you know, are on the mission field, people that are business people. You know, you have men and ladies. You just have all that varied input to come. You know, all believers that are giving input on that.
Well, and that's kind of the whole idea with this series, is to show people that, maybe make people, especially our own people, believe in some of this again, in who Mennonites actually are. And a list like that really encourages me, because it's easy if you're not paying close attention to, like what you said, haven't changed our opinion in 50 years. You know, like, oh well, we just won't eat it. And that's just not the case. I mean, I know my church just in the last 2 years, 1 year, has been changing some things because things are changing. It used to be movies, you know, like what kind of movies will we allow in a home? Well, that has now shifted. Yeah, that's still true. But now there's also online, YouTube, Vimeo, I mean, Netflix. Okay, that's changed. All right, so now how are we going to address that?